What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today we've got our Week 14 fantasy football wide receiver starts and sits for every single matchup, so make sure to tune in. If you enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. Let us hear it in the comment section. Do you agree, disagree, along with any other questions you guys might have? We will do our best to answer them all. But with that being said, let's get right into it. Today's video is brought to you guys by Birddogs. And look, I know we're all searching for that perfect pair of shorts or pants that offers the best style, the best comfort, the best bang for your buck. Well, guess what? That search is over because Birddogs offers all of that and so much more. If you're looking for shorts, they have a ton of options with active wear, casual wear, or even beach wear. On top of that, their pants have a selection of khakis, joggers, and sweatpants. So what are you waiting for? Regardless of the occasion of the season, get yourself the most stylish, the most comfortable pair of pants with a built-in liner from Birddogs.com. And if you use promo code ADP today, you'll get a free rope hat with your purchase. Again, that's birddogs.com, code ADP, and you'll get a free rope hat with your purchase. Make sure to check out birddogs.com, link in the description, and we kick off Week 14 with the Raiders at the Rams on Thursday night. And I really do think this is going to be a pretty one-sided affair in terms of which team you want to target for fantasy success, and that is by far and away the Las Vegas Raiders, especially at the wide receiver position. Here, it's pretty much Davante Adams and kind of end a list there. I mean, he's been great these last couple of weeks, another sensational game in Week 13. And now, sure, Mac Hollins is getting some volume, but I don't think this is going to be all that competitive of a game. And I think we could see the Raiders do the majority of their damage early and then kind of transition to running the football and not prioritizing the pass. That's why I would rather sit Mac Hollins here. And then Davante Adams, obviously a must start. For the Rams, it's a complete mess. You know, I thought maybe last week we could see some Van Jefferson success. Wasn't necessarily the case. Now, the big news for the Rams, they claim Baker Mayfield, who was released by the Panthers. He might or might not play come Week 14 on Thursday. It's a quick turnaround, but honestly, I don't think it matters all that much. The Rams offensively are a mess. They have a bunch of injuries. The offensive line isn't all that great. And, you know, he wasn't having success offensively with the Panthers. I don't think that's going to all of a sudden change with the Rams, who, you know, you can make the argument are in a worse off position offensively. So I'm sitting all the Rams wide receivers. Then we go to the Vikings at the Lions. And I'm excited about this one because I think it could be a high-scoring affair. So the wide receivers here have very nice upside. Justin Jefferson, obviously, a top 3 play every single week, especially versus this Lions secondary. You fire him up. And then Adam Thielen, I think he could be a very solid wide receiver to play this week. Again, it won't be the case every single week, but when you're going up against what should be, you know, a kind of underperforming Lions defense in a game that should be back and forth, I think Thielen does have fantasy appeal this week. Then for the Lions, Amon-Ra St. Brown, I mean, he's been a top 10 play when healthy pretty much all season long. I think that continues here. He's still the primary target. And then, again, similar for the Lions, I think they're going to have to pass the football here to stay competitive, to stay in this game. I do think DJ Shark could be a decent dart throw, him kind of returning, being healthy now. Looks like the number 2 wide receiver. I think long-term it will be Jameson Williams, but, you know, he's still early on from his return from a major injury that he suffered. Obviously missed a bunch of time so far. So I don't think the Lions are necessarily, I mean, if last week was any indication, give him a bunch of volume right out the get-go. So for that reason, I'd go with DJ Shark. I think he's a low-end wide receiver too, and then I'd sit the other guys. You know, I think there's just too many mouths to feed afterwards, so Williams and Josh Reynolds to me are sits for the Lions. Afterwards, we go to the Ravens at the Steelers, and here I do have Deontay Johnson for Pittsburgh listed as a start, and honestly, that might even be pushing it. I think it's very fair to say here you don't really arguably want to start any of these wide receivers. I mean, for the Ravens, Lamar Jackson trending towards not playing this week. I mean, even with him under center, the wide receivers weren't getting a lot of opportunities, a lot of volume. So now I continue to stand by it. I'm sitting all the Ravens wide receivers. For the Steelers, there's really only one guy that can be fantasy viable here on a week-to-week basis. That's either going to be Deontay Johnson, George Pickens. Pickens a little bit upset right now, making some headlines that he's not getting targeted enough. I don't think that's the way to get in the good graces of this offense of Tomlin as your head coach. But look, I do have, again, Deontay Johnson listed as a start, but I think what you're probably going to get from him is like 5-6 catches for 50, 60 yards. So he's very much so in the wide receiver 3 category, and I'd only be starting him if you are in PPR formats. Then we go to the Browns at the Bengals. I'm not going to lie to you. The Browns, specifically Deshaun Watson, did not look good offensively this last week, but they were bailed out by playing the Texans and by their defense. They're not going to be able to do the same thing here versus the Bengals. The positive news is that Amari Cooper got a bunch of volume, and I think that will continue to be the case. I have him as a high-end wide receiver too. We really need to see, for Cooper and those other Cleveland options, pass catching wise, to be viable. We need to see Deshaun Watson have a somewhat quick, turnaround here offensively. Then for the Bengals, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, I would take a chance on all of them, honestly. Jamar Chase, in his first game back, looked very good. T. Higgins had a touchdown. Tyler Boyd barely dropped a huge touchdown. And I think there's going to be a lot of points scored here through the air for the Bengals. So I would take a chance on all these guys. Chase, a wide receiver 1. Higgins, high in wide receiver 2. Boyd, kind of in that wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 category. And then I would sit Donovan Peoples-Jones for the Browns. Again, I don't like the passing volume right now with Deshaun Watson, so I don't want to risk it with anyone outside of Cooper at the moment. Then Jets at the Bills. For New York, it's Garrett Wilson. As long as Mike White is under center for the Jets, even though he's probably not the quarterback solution there, Wilson is fantasy viable. He's getting hyper targeted, and that's all you could ask for, especially in PPR formats for fantasy football purposes. And yes, this is a tough matchup versus the Bills, but he should still get the volume. I think his floor is at least 10 points in PPR scoring, so I will start him. I have him as a low to mid-level wide receiver 2. And then afterwards, I'm sitting these other wide receivers for the Jets, Corey Davis, Elijah Moore. I think it's too tough to predict who's going to be the number 2 guy after Garrett Wilson. And again, I don't love this matchup for the Jets going up against this Bills defense. For Buffalo, I will start Stephon Diggs. That's, a no-brainer, top 3 wide receiver this season. And then I will go with Gabe Davis. Similar to what I said last week, to me, he is the number 2 wide receiver for the Bills. Kind of boomer bust, yes, but the upside is there considering the Bills' offense. And then I would sit Isaiah McKenzie because, again, to me, he just isn't going to get enough volume consistently. So I'd rather go with Diggs and Gabe Davis. Afterwards, Texans at the Cowboys. So Brendan Cooks I currently have as a sit. Last week, he was a surprise late scratch from that game. Nico Collins got a bunch of targets. The news for the Texans is that Davis Mills is going to be the quarterback again. Doesn't really matter. Neither one of Mills or Kyle Allen is the quarterback answer for Houston. But I do think Nico Collins here could potentially get a lot of volume, especially if Brendan Cooks sits again. So from a pure, volume play, PPR scoring, I think Nico Collins can get you around 10, 11 points, similar to a Deontay Johnson. So keep that in mind, but I think probably safer to have him in the wide receiver 3 category. Then for the Cowboys, CeeDee Lamb, I'll start him, obviously, but I don't think his upside is as high as, in other weeks just because of the opponent. You're not going to see the Cowboys probably throw it as much. You're going to see them running the ball on the awful Houston Texans run defense. CeeDee Lamb, if he does his damage, it's going to have to be early, but he still belongs in the wide receiver 1 category. And then I'm sitting Michael Gallup. Yes, I know he had a big game, but it's not going to be all that often where you have 2 touchdowns on 4 catches. So keep that in mind. And again, I think the game flow of the situation might work against the Cowboys pass catchers. So to me, Gallup is a sit. Then Eagles at the Giants. I'll start the top names here for both sides. For the Eagles, that's A.J. Brown, that's Devonta Smith. I think A.J. Brown in standard formats is a wide receiver 1. Devonta Smith, a little bit more boomer bust in the wide receiver 2 category, but he is still a start, especially with how the Eagles have played all season long offensively. Then for the Giants, I think this is going to be a game where they have to throw a bunch. They're not going to be able to rely on the legs of Daniel Jones or Saquon Barkley. So to me, Darius Slayton is that guy. He should get a lot of volume. Again, another one of these volume plays that I think is a solid wide receiver 3 in PPR formats. Afterwards, Jaguars at the Titans. So a bit of a question mark here because we don't really know if Trevor Lawrence is going to play or not. Even if he doesn't play, I still think Christian Kirk is probably the guy that you want to go with here. he's been the number one wide receiver for the Jaguars. If Trevor Lawrence does play, I might take a dart throw on Zay Jones, but, I'd probably just prefer to stick with Christian Kirk. I think this is going to be a lower scoring game. Then for the Titans, Treylon Burks, if he plays, obviously took a huge hit last week, didn't come back. If he plays, even though I think it's a long shot, I'll take a chance on him. I think he's a low-end wide receiver too, with some decent upside because he's the top pass catcher for the Titans. But outside of that, don't really love the Titans pass catchers, like I've said all season long. Even if Burks doesn't play, I wouldn't force starting any of those Titans wide receivers. Afterwards, Chiefs at the Broncos. For Kansas City, look, they kind of had an atypical game last week. Patrick Mahomes barely had over 200 yards, not that many passing touchdowns. Not going to happen every week. So I think he's going to bounce back, and I think that Juju Smith-Schuster is going to have a little bit of a better week. But again, we're seeing some of those early season concerns with Juju Smith-Schuster now towards the end of the year. It was great in the middle point of the season, but now we're seeing like 4 or 5 targets a game, 3-4 catches for like 30, 40 yards. Tough to get excited about that. I'll start him, but I have him kind of a middle to high-end wide receiver 3. He does have the upside, though, because he is on this Chiefs offense. And for the Broncos, Courtland Sutton, we still don't know if he's going to play or not. If he does, though, I take a chance on him simply because the Broncos are going to have to air out the football here to keep pace with the Chiefs. I realize how bad they are. Probably won't be a lot of touchdowns, but there should be a lot of opportunities here, a lot of volume. So if he plays, I will start Sutton. I think he's a solid low-end wide receiver too. And if he doesn't, Jerry Jeudy probably, in the same breath, low to mid-level wide receiver too. And I'd even start Jeudy if Courtland Sutton does play because, he might be limited. He might not be 100%. And again, the opportunity should be there in a game where the Broncos should be passing a bunch. I'm sitting MVS for the Chiefs because I wouldn't be shocked if this game transitions to them running the football as they kind of pull away from the Broncos. And I just don't think that outside of Kelsey and Juju that there's many reliable fantasy options here for Kansas City. Moving on, Panthers at the Seahawks. I'll start DJ Moore. We know Sam Darnold is starting for the Panthers. And I've said this for a long time, even though he's not the answer at the quarterback position, he offers the highest upside for all these pass catchers. I think DJ Moore is a low to mid-level wide receiver 2. For the Seahawks, Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, both high-end wide receiver 2s, as has been the case all season long. Then Bucs at the 49ers. So for Tampa Bay, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, both high-end wide receiver 2s in my opinion. Yes, the 49ers defense is a little bit stingy, but I still think that Godwin and Evans can have some decent opportunities, especially with how bad the Buccaneers rushing game has been. And then for San Francisco, we should mention, obviously, Jimmy Garoppolo, done for the regular season. So, maybe the pass catching upside for everyone on this offense is going to decline a little bit. I think that's fair to say. I would still start Deebo Samuel and Brendan Ayuk, though. I think they're both low to mid-level wide receiver 2s. And then for the Bucs, outside of Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, I've said this all season long, everyone else, huge teardrop. So Julio Jones and Russell Gage are sits for me. Then Dolphins at the Chargers, another game where I think this could be a very high-scoring affair. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, you start them. I think Tua is going to bounce back. I think Jalen Waddle is going to bounce back. So to me, both the Miami wide receivers are in the top 10 wide receiver conversation. For the Chargers, Keenan Allen, the good news. He's staying healthy, and he got a bunch of targets this last week. I think the Chargers are going to have to throw the ball a bunch here. And, he's a high-end wide receiver too, especially in PPR formats. Mike Williams didn't play last week. If he does return, I will play him because, again, I think the Chargers are going to have to go back and forth here with the Dolphins through the air. And honestly, even if Williams does play, I would still start Josh Palmer because wouldn't be shocked if Mike Williams isn't at 100%. Josh Palmer should still get some more opportunities. He saw a lot of targets last week. He's trending up, so I do like him kind of in that low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3 range. And I just think it becomes too many people, too many names. DeAndre Carter is a sit for me. Afterwards, Patriots at the Cardinals. I'll start Jacoby Myers if he does play. He's kind of missed some practices, but if he's not available, I wouldn't force anyone else here for the Patriots. They're already inconsistent enough at the wide receiver position. Not really a pass-heavy team. For the Cardinals, DeAndre Hopkins and Marquise Brown. Before the bye week, Marquise Brown played, looked okay, and I think he's only going to get better now coming off the bye week, going to get more opportunities. I don't have DeAndre Hopkins as a wide receiver one anymore. A lot of the reasons why that was the case beforehand was that Marquise Brown was injured, similar to why Marquise Brown was in that category when DeAndre Hopkins was suspended. So now to me, they're both mid-level wide receiver twos. But with that, we wrap up our Week 14 fantasy football wide receiver starts and sits for every single matchup. If you guys enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. Let us hear in the comment section, did you agree, disagree, along with any other questions you guys might have. We will do our best to answer them all, but in the meantime, we'll see you guys in future videos.